And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. You know, here on the network, we cover a ton of different trials in real time. But could you imagine going back and living out a trial from the 18th century? How about when John Adams, second president of the United States and one of our nation's founding fathers, defended British soldiers charged with killing 5 civilians in the infamous Boston Massacre? Do you want to be transported to that time? Well, in a new book, we get to experience that case through an incredible trial transcript. Joining us now is the author of John Adams Under Fire, the Founding Fathers' Fight for Injustice in the Boston Massacre Trial, founder of Law and Crime, our very own Dan Abrams. Dan, good to see you here.
Jesse, great to be here with you.
Now, you've written about Abraham Lincoln.
Yep.
You've written about Teddy Roosevelt. Why John Adams now?
So this is sort of the culmination of what is a 3-book series taking you through the American legal system. And this is the beginning. We've sort of gone back to the beginning of 1770. The Lincoln case in 1859 was Lincoln's last big murder trial. The legal system had developed a bit, but they were still creating the law. By 1915, when Teddy Roosevelt was on the stand in the case we did most recently, the law was pretty similar to where it is today. But back then, in 1770, this is a case that may have prevented the American Revolution from happening 6 years earlier. Think about it. Tensions are rising between Britain, between England and America and the colonists. And 5 colonists are killed by British soldiers. The colonists were furious. The soldiers get put on trial. No one wants to represent them. John Adams agrees to take the case. And this is where we get the phrase, facts are stubborn things. It's where we got the legal standard of reasonable doubt. And it becomes a really critical case in American history. And that's why we focused on it. And because it's a transcript. The fact there's a 217-page transcript of this case from 1770 is amazing. And, and there's a comparison to Law and Crime in the sense that, what we're doing here is we're covering trials. And we talk about, why do we do what we do? The answer I always give when people say, well, should you be covering trials? And the answer that I say is I think it's important for people to be able to see these cases. It's important for them to be able to see the people of the state of Florida, the people of the state of Wisconsin versus a defendant. See what the government is doing in these cases. And in really controversial cases, it can assure people the system is working. That's what this transcript did. It takes you back then to see the words of the lawyers and the witnesses, I think, is what calmed the anger and prevented what could have been violence.
Yeah, and you talk about these similarities but differences between trials now and trials then, but yet you still have a lawyer who is representing an unpopular defendant. We happen all the time. What was it like for Adams to be in that position? Because it couldn't have been easy.
No, he had rocks thrown through his window. He lost half his legal business as a result of it. This was not an easy thing for him. And, every criminal defense lawyer now compares themselves to Adams, right? Says, well, John Adams represented the British soldiers, and that's why I'm representing, name the horrible person that the person's representing. And that's one of the greatest things. And that's true. I mean, it's true that that's what defense attorneys do. But here, Adams actually went and talked to the soldiers before he agreed to fully move forward. He wanted to know, what's the defense? He wanted to know, make sure that there was a valid, legitimate defense. And this story is not the Boston Massacre you learned about in school. That story where you see the lithograph of a bunch of British soldiers with weapons pointed at the colonists, that didn't happen. This was a much more nuanced situation. And so if you like murder trials, and I'm guessing that you do.
Hopefully they do.
If you're here, I'm guessing you do. Then that's what this is. This is a book about a great murder trial from 1770.
Yeah, the first few pages, when you actually relive the massacre itself and you relive the shooting itself, it's not what I expected. It's not what you said. You hear it reads like a thriller. So when we read this book, I mean, I guess the question is is how do we think about this framing? Do you think that this launched him into his presidency? I mean, what was this trial for him?
So look, it made him very unpopular for a while. You know, one of the things that assured him he was going to be okay was a few years later, he got elected to a local position. His cousin, Sam Adams, who was not just the name behind a very nice beer, but who actually was one of the Sons of Liberty, one of the people who was using violence at times to get what they wanted against the British, was much more aggressive. And so when Sam Adams ultimately sort of welcomed John back, he knew it was going to be okay. So I guess it's a long way of saying, I think in the early days after the case, it wasn't helpful for him, but he looked back on it as one of the most important things he ever did in his career.
And you talk about the transcript. What did you learn by reading this trial transcript? What did you learn about how this trial proceeded and maybe some of the inner thoughts or workings of these people?
I guess it struck me that there are still similarities to today. I mean, you know, we all watch criminal trials all the time. And we see the witnesses and we see the differences sometimes in testimony. And this was a case all about eyewitness testimony. It's all about, I was standing there, here's what I said, here's what this person said, here's what I saw, here's this person. And we see some of that today. I mean, this is, you know, we don't quite tend to see it as raw as this, which is all eyewitness testimony as the trial. But, you know, it's similar. And there were definitely some aspects of the case that a lawyer who argues a case today would recognize from this trial.
There were two trials, though, right?
Yeah,
there's
that's
the
right.
one of the commander, and then there's the one of the soldiers. How
Right.
do those differ?
So the captain was first put on trial, and the allegation was that he'd ordered the troops to fire. And if that's true, captain's in big trouble, soldiers maybe not in as much trouble. Without disclosing the full end of the book, although you could certainly look it up on, you know, it's not like it's not out there. It was 250 years
Like
ago.
spoiling the ending of Titanic.
Yeah, exactly. But I will tell you, the Captain Preston was found not guilty quite easily, I think. There were witnesses who said they saw him order fire. It's pretty clear he didn't. And that made the soldiers' trial that much more important and impactful. Because now they couldn't point to the captain and say, he's the one who told us to do it. Because that didn't happen. And so now the question became, what did the soldiers do? When did they fire? How many rocks were being thrown at them? How did they respond? Did the first shot go up in the air? I mean, you know, where the shots were fired is the sort of issue we would evaluate today, except we could have much better ballistics than we did back then, although they did find some of the bullets, which they tried to sort of help them figure out exactly where it might have ricocheted off of, et cetera. Same sort of thing you do in a case today.
It's amazing that you hear these similarities.
Yeah.
And you know, I got to tell you, I was reading the book. I'm on the first few chapters. It reads like a thriller.
Did you only read the first few chapters?
I read the first few chapters.
Okay.
It came out yesterday.
All right,
Dan.
well, thank
Came
you.
out
It's
yesterday.
True. We should have gotten you an advance copy. That's my fault. Yeah.
I read the first few, and it was amazing. But I got to ask you $1 million question. It's third book.
Yeah.
It's as great as the other two. We have a fourth one coming out?
There is a fourth book coming up, which we have not announced yet. I will say that it relates to another big case where there's a transcript, and it involves peripherally a president.
Okay.
So you know that'll be the fourth book in the series.
Well, keep having them come out. They're great, and thanks for coming on and talking.
Jesse,
about it.
thank you for all the great work you do here on Law and Crime.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, all right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a lot more here on Law and Crime. Stay tuned.